California at the Hal Leonard booth, which is a great place to be, especially for me. And we're with our good friends Raul and Valerie from Bass Musician Magazine, and they have asked me to talk about my books and my stuff and what I have going on that is of interest to bass players and even a few non-bass players. Hal Leonard I've been with since my first Hal Leonard book came out in 1992, and that's called Funk Bass. And it came with, they used to come with a cover, and then there was another cover over it, and inside the outside cover or the inside cover there was a cassette tape. And then as technology advanced, the books started coming with a CD, and they still had a cover and then another cover inside. And the next version they had the book, and there was a CD in the back cover. So there was only one cover instead of the fake cover. Now the technology is really cool. There's no CD. There's a URL on the title page with a special code, and you can get all the audio from the books. You can speed it up, slow it down, loop it, do whatever you want. The Funk Bass book is strictly a slapping book. It's all thumb and pop, and it's how to get that technique. I start with the very basics and work through all kinds of different techniques, and it gets pretty advanced toward the end. And I've got a whole chapter just on funk bass soloing. And my good friend John Patitucci wrote the foreword to that, and I've got endorsements from, who endorsed that? Rich Appleman, Stu Ham, Will Lee, Bob Cranshaw, may he rest in peace, several others. And then we did a 20-year anniversary edition of Funk Bass, which came out, I guess, in 2012. I contacted every single person that gave me an endorsement in 1992 and asked if they would mind reiterating that endorsement. Every single one of them came through. 20 years later, still a great book. Will Lee, John Patitucci, Stu Ham, Brian Bromberg was another one. So that book got me into the publishing business. So I said, well, let's do a follow-up book where funk bass is all slapping and popping, funk fusion bass is all fingerstyle funk. There's a bunch of technique at the beginning and an overview, and again, gradually getting more involved and more intricate. I have a whole big chapter, a whole big collection, just like funk bass, and funk fusion bass, a whole chapter on establishing a groove. And I've got, I don't know how many examples, one after another, with accompaniment, with drums. Most of the books have guitar, and then a whole chapter building a vocabulary for funk fusion soloing. I got my friend Verdine White from Earth, Wind & Fire to write the foreword to that, and endorsements from Abraham Laboriel, Steve Bailey, Victor Whoop, Rocco Prestia from Tower of Power, and a few others. We're going back a few years, so I don't remember all of them. Then I said, let's do a rock book. So I did a rock bass book, which was a lot of fun to write because I took the approach of what was happening in the world and in society and in culture in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and how art responded to that and music responded to that and how bass was a part of that. So I have a whole collection of bass grooves in the rock bass styles of the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, which was so much fun to write. And then I have also a whole chapter on rock bass soloing. That book originally came out, I don't know, I think around 96 or so. It was just reissued a few years ago. The first one was endorsed by Tim Bogert from Vanilla Fudge, Tom Hamilton from Aerosmith, and David Ellefson from Megadeth. When we re-released it in 2000 and whatever, I had asked my friend Billy Sheehan to take a look at it. He liked it so much, he ended up writing the foreword to the new edition. And I also got additional endorsements from Rudy Sarzo and from Tony Levin and from Marco Mendoza and from Mike Watt and a few others. So that was a lot of fun. The next book is called Blues Bass. And it starts out with a history and an overview of every kind of blues you can imagine, maybe even a couple you had never heard of. The Mississippi Delta Blues, the Chicago Blues, New Orleans Blues, West Coast Blues, and some odd time signatures in there. I have some, what else do I have in there? Some jazz-oriented stuff. And again, a whole chapter on blues bass soloing. And each of the books has an extensive discography for additional recommended listening. They all come with guitar and drums along with the bass. You can pan it so that the guitar and the drums are completely silent, and you can just scrutinize and analyze the bass. I guess I was pretty brave to do that. Or you can turn down the bass completely and turn up the drums and the guitar and play along. The next book is called Bass Grooves, The Ultimate Collection. That was a blast to write. I went through so many styles. It was designed to be like a reference book. If you want to learn, you take it off the shelf, open it up. If you want some examples of jazz, grooves, rock, funk, R&B, slapping, Latin, country, reggae. Did I say Latin? I don't remember if I said Latin or not, but Latin. And then I have a chapter called More Grooves. So I had like dance and punk and a few others. I figured who has played all kinds of different grooves that would be a good person to write the foreword? Will Lee from the David Letterman Show. And boy, you know what? I got a whole bunch of other endorsements there, but I just don't remember who they are. Then I went to the Hal Leonard folks after that, and I said, what else do you need? And Jeff Schradel, who's my longtime Hal Leonard contact, he's been so good to me, as has everyone else at Hal Leonard. He says, well, we have a book called Guitar Aerobics that does very well, and I'd like to add bass aerobics to that series. And I said, great. I took a look, and I came up with a concept and an approach that I thought was appropriate and would work. And that book has just taken off. Bass aerobics. Jeff Berlin, I contacted. I said, I have a book. I think it would make sense for you. You'd be a good person to write the foreword to that. And he says, oh, I don't endorse books. I don't write for it. Nobody really understands music education. There are so very few people who really get it. So I said, well, all right, I understand. The book came out. Several months later, I got a call from Jeff Berlin. John, yeah. I just looked at your manuscript. I really like this book. I said, well, thanks, Jeff. You want to write the foreword? Yeah, sure. So the second edition of Bass Aerobics, foreword by Jeff Berlin. I also got endorsements from Alfonso Johnson, from Kaya Card, from Leland Sklar, from, I don't remember, but you'll have to take a look and see. So we're at the NAMM Show a few years ago, and I'm having my annual meeting with Jeff Schradel here at Hal Leonard, and he says, we have a new series. We have a book called Play Like Chet Atkins, and we have one called Play Like Eric Clapton. I'd like to have Play Like Jaco Pastorius, and I'd like you to write it. I was very honored, and I said yes. And there was a very specific format and pattern that I needed to follow, and I didn't realize at the time that I had to record all the bass tracks of everything in there, not just what the examples of Jaco's technique and his riffs and things like that, but entire tunes like Donna Lee and The Chicken and Birdland. There are 5 complete tunes and then a bunch of excerpts, signature riffs, signature licks. We have a section on Jaco's equipment. There's a section called Stylistic DNA, and I worked really, really, really hard on not just writing the book. That was, writing a book. I know how to write a book, but coming up with what to write, and more importantly, playing those bass tracks. I got them down. I was happy with the way they came out. The Hal Leonard people were very happy with the way they came out. I've been at the NAMM Show this year. I've been here the last 3 days. I didn't even notice that they are promoting this book here called Play Like Jaco Pastorius. It just blew me away. Actually, I was on Phil Chen's Facebook page last night, and he's standing there, and I said, whoa, look what's over his shoulder. That's my book. So when I was a few tunes into laying down the bass tracks for this, I get a call from the Hal Leonard folks, and they said, put the audio on hold for a minute because we have another Jaco book, and we'd like you to record the bass tracks for that as well. That's 8 tunes. That's Joni Mitchell's Dry Cleaner from Des Moines, Herbie Hancock's 4 a.m. I think there are one or two tunes that are also on the Play Like Jocko book, but Right Size Life, Pat Metheny. Again, I don't remember, but I'll just give you a heads up. This is the first time anybody has heard this. I haven't even told my wife yet. I'm kind of afraid to, but I said I have another book in me. Let's talk about having another book released at the 2018 NAMM Show. I literally, honestly, have absolutely no idea what it's going to be, but Mr. Schradel said, I have a lot that I want to do. I just haven't assigned it or haven't come up with an author yet, so I'll find you a title and you can do that. Other than that, I have, after I sold, I don't know, 100,000 or so copies of my method books and saw that they were being translated into French, German, and Japanese, and I don't know what other languages, I started my own online bass instruction site, and I go through all kinds of different categories for bass players of all levels. I have a category called Easy, I have a category called Basics, B-A-S-S-I-C-S, Scales and Theory, Sight Reading, and I go through lots of different genres, jazz and blues, rock and metal, funk, R&B, slapping, soloing. I was very, very careful not to duplicate anything from any of my books, but they work very well together to supplement each other, and I even have on there for additional study whichever one of my books or whichever ones of my books would be most appropriate for a particular lesson. Last time I counted, I had somewhere over 100 lessons right now. I have subscribers from almost every state, and I don't know how many countries, but people in Spain, Germany, France, Italy, Brazil, Poland, Norway, all over the world. So I'm glad to see that people like what I do, and they're letting me help them become better bass players. In my spare time, I run a website called ForBassPlayersOnly.com. I've interviewed about 500 bass players of all genres, everybody from Paul McCartney and Geezer Butler, Tom Hamilton, the jazz guys Ron Carter, John Patitucci, Dave Holland, Buster Williams. And we have the news, and we have we have a very friendly relationship with Bass Musician Magazine. There's some overlap. We kind of do some of the same things, but I like them, and I guess they like me. April 1st, 2016, I launched a new site called ForGuitarPlayersOnly.com, and we wanted to come out really strong and swinging. Our first interview on April 1st was Peter Frampton, and then we followed that up with Steve Miller, and then Carlos Santana, and eventually we got Joe Walsh, Neil Young, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, Dweezil Zappa, Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, Neil Schoen, and I know a whole bunch more. So we're really excited about that. The company that I have, that I started, is called Notehead Media Group, LLC, and that is the parent company for BassPlayersOnly.com, ForGuitarPlayersOnly.com, JonLiebman.com, and the next one we are getting ready to launch is called ForDrummersOnly.com, and after that will be ForKeyboardPlayersOnly.com. So we will have what I refer to as the Big Four: piano, guitar, bass, and drums. And the education component is going to be a major factor in all of those, and there are a lot of cool things in the works that I can't talk about yet, but we're knee-deep into something right now that I think you're going to like and will be of interest to musicians everywhere. So, in a nutshell, to make a long story short, way too late for that, thank you so much to Raul and Valerie and everybody at Bass Musician Magazine for letting me describe what I do, some of what I do, and what I've got going on. Great people, great publication, Bass Musician Magazine, and this is kind of an annual tradition we have at NAMM to sit down and get together, and I truly appreciate it. So thanks Raul, thanks Valerie, and thank you all for watching. I am Jon Liebman from the 2017 Winter NAMM Show, Anaheim, California. Take care, we'll see you soon. Check out my websites.